Shalom. Today I'd like to talk to you about the subject, what to do about our defeats. A serious subject. This year, the 17th day of the Hebrew month Tammuz coincides with Thursday, July 9th. That is the beginning of a period of semi-mourning in the Jewish religion, known as the 3 weeks. It is also called between the two constrictions, Bein HaMitzarim in Hebrew, meaning that this period of 3 weeks begins and also ends with sad anniversaries. According to Jewish tradition, both the first and the second holy temples in Jerusalem were destroyed on the 9th day of Av at the end of this 3-week period. What about the first of the dates, the 17th day of Tammuz? Tradition relates that that is the day when the walls of Jerusalem were breached by the attacking enemy. But does that mean that on the 17th of Tammuz, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls of Jerusalem? Or does it mean that that's the day when the Roman general Titus breached the city walls? Or does it mean both? Or might it mean something else yet again? It's actually not so clear. In the Bible itself, the book of 2 Kings and also the book of Jeremiah, the citations for the breaching of the wall of Jerusalem by the army of Nebuchadnezzar give not the 17th day of Tammuz, but the 9th day of the 4th month, which is Tammuz. Some of the rabbis of the Jerusalem Talmud, written many hundreds of years later, were committed to the idea that the 17th of Tammuz referred to both catastrophes. Reading in the Bible that the disaster was on the 9th, they offered an ingenious explanation. They theorized that the Babylonian army breached the city wall on the 9th, but was occupied in hunting down the Jewish king, who had in the meantime escaped from the southern exit of the city while they were breaking through from the northern wall. Only on the 17th, according to this explanation, did the Babylonians exploit the breach they had made and begin the street-by-street reduction of the city's defenses. That explanation has never seemed convincing to me. It's not like the Union Army's capture of Norfolk, Virginia on May 10th, 1862. The Federals came from Hampton, to the north of the body of water that we call Hampton Roads, where they controlled Fort Monroe. And while they proceeded from north to south, the Confederates escaped by way of the Elizabeth River and Portsmouth to the south of Norfolk. But the Babylonians had besieged Jerusalem. They had army units stationed all around the city. It's not likely that they would have suspended their large-scale attacks upon the city to apprehend a relatively small party of escaping Judeans. Another possible solution, this one preferred by the rabbis of the Babylonian Talmud, also centuries after the Bible, is that the 17th day of Tammuz was a date connected to the destruction of the second temple by the Romans, not connected to the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. Then the dates of the destruction of both temples were conflated. I think there's more to be said for this possibility, and yet I don't think the case is clinched. According to the historian Josephus, who wrote extensively and as an eyewitness about the siege of Jerusalem, there were several rings of city walls defending Jerusalem during the Roman siege. Those rings of walls were not all breached at the same time. So it's hard to see how the date of the 17th of Tammuz was principally connected to the demolition of the walls, since that demolition is a time span, not a one-day event. In the history of the Second Temple's destruction, the closest we get to Tammuz 17, which usually falls in mid-July, is the date of July 14th in the year 70 of the Common Era. On that date, according to the Roman historian Livy, Jewish prisoners told their Roman captors that the priests had suspended the daily sacrifices in the Jerusalem temple. But again, the Babylonian Talmud gives us a different perspective. It dates the catastrophe of the suspension of sacrificial worship in the temple on 17 Tammuz to the first temple period, not the Roman period. Moreover, we are not certain that 14 July in the year 70 was in fact the 17th day of Tammuz. We use a calendar conversion system which is based on mathematical algorithms, and we don't know for a fact if those identical algorithms were in use as far back as the year 70. But if you do apply the math, you end up with the date of July 14th equals Tammuz 19, not Tammuz 17. All of these uncertainties have prompted me to look further. When I did, I found out something astounding that I would like to share with you. There were a number of pagan religious systems popular in the days of the Bible and into rabbinic times that considered the 17th day of Tammuz a time of mourning. It's not unique to Judaism. The Babylonians had a god named Dumuzi, after whom the month Tammuz is named. He was the god of the shepherds. In their religion, he was responsible for the grass that sustains the sheep. In the Near East, the arid heat of the summer causes the grass to die off. It is revived only by the autumn rains. I myself have been to Israel often during the summer, and I've noticed how brown the hillsides often are. After many trips to that country, I went once in late February and in March, and I was delighted to see those same hillsides vibrantly green and crowned with wildflowers. Following the seasonal pattern, part of the ancient Mesopotamian and Canaanite religions involved women who would engage in traditional mourning rituals for the dead god Tammuz. See, when the grass died off, their myth was that the god had died. The point of their rituals was to facilitate his resurrection. Just as the 40 days of Lent precede the Christian holiday of resurrection, i.e. Easter, in these older Near Eastern systems, the period of Lenten restrictions and of mournful wailing preceded the resurrection of their god. Women abstained from eating anything milled. They subsisted on chickpeas, raisins, dates, and soaked wheat. Similarly, a Babylonian almanac specified the 17th day of Tammuz as a date for nocturnal torchlight processions in honor of their god, Nergal. That god was associated with the high summer sun that scorched the crops. He was therefore considered a god of death. This focus on the 17th was also found in ancient Egyptian religion. The 17th day of the third month was the date observed in that country of the death of their god Osiris, the god of agriculture and also the god of the underworld. Why the 17th in all these different religions? My own theory is that the 17th day of a lunar month is the day when the moon is definitely beginning to wane. In many ancient pagan systems, the waning of the moon was considered a symbol of the forces of the waning of life, the advance of the forces of death. Conversely, the rebirth of the moon after its dark period was a symbol of the renewal of life. We even see echoes of that in the rabbinic blessing over the reappearing waxing crescent moon. All of these tidbits point to a larger truth. The Jewish authors encountered a series of myths and practices that was already time-honored in their day. But being Jews, they did not venerate those myths. They worshipped only the one God. And yet, the popular attraction to those myths was too great to ignore completely. And so the rabbis erased the mythology and substituted historical type explanations. They connected the 17th of Tammuz to two different kinds of catastrophes, both the losses inflicted upon us by enemies without, and also the self-inflicted wounds that our various failures occasioned. This leads me to the point I wish to share about the turmoil of today. We in America are reckoning with a number of sobering truths. We have not handled the challenge of containing the virus of COVID-19 as well as we could or should have. And now we will have to endure more pain for longer. We have not faced our history of racism as steadfastly as we should have. And now we have to accomplish a belated reckoning and an overdue national repentance. In all this sober reflection, the Jewish tradition gives us good guidance. Looking at the hard time of our history, we don't seek scapegoats. We don't rage against imaginary enemies and puff ourselves up. We strive to see what we could have done differently and better. That's the meaning of the transfer of those myth-driven holidays of paganism to the realm of history. We reaffirm that in a world where much is out of our control, our behavior, which is the stuff of history, is in our control. And that behavior can help us turn around our decline and produce a platform for renewed greatness. Indeed, an honest reckoning with our failings is the only way to produce a more genuine greatness. That's what we need to do about defeats. Shalom.